Welcome back to the Mom Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we're very excited to have Dawn with us to hit a bunch of great topics, including Mobus Operandi, mob for hire concepts. So kind of this brainstorming on, could there be a mob for hire, and also Teal and Rust. So we got a lot of great things lined up. Before jumping into those, Dawn, do you mind giving us a little introduction to yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Can I say I've freelanced software for a while, maybe 8 years, and from a more web background, but now I'm much more into Rust. Yes, that's pretty much it. I'm a husband, and I'm an Israeli in Thailand for more than 3 years.
Nice, right on. Yeah, and so thank you for doing the time zone difference here. We're spanning the globe with this episode, so coming all the way from Thailand. And I think the way we first became aware of each other was that you started this mob programming meetup on Rust under the name of, I'm probably going to say the name wrong again, Mobus Operandi, and we love the pun, by the way. So what was the genesis of this meetup for you?
This pun is almost a wasted pun. I'm not sure how large this little community that I founded is going to be, but this pun is like one of the good ones. Mobus Operandi. Well, I wanted to study Rust with Mob, because Mob for me is a lot. I discovered that it's very difficult for me to be sustainable in as a software developer, sitting alone, writing code, figuring things out. It's I love the profession, but this format is just I can't do it for long. And people talk about fatigue and burnout, and I had that. And so I discovered pair programming and later mob programming, and it's so much better for me, and I enjoy every moment of doing that in whatever context. So I found some people to study Rust with, just for myself, and it grew a little bit beyond that. Now there are 4 groups on 4 different schedules, and I participate in 2 of them. So I managed to study at least 2 hours of Rust in mob format every day, almost every day.
Nice. Yeah, and I find that fascinating. It's just like, hey, I want to learn, and so the first move to is let's find people to mob with to learn. I think that's fantastic. And at least for me, I'm not very familiar with Rust. So what led you into the Rust world, and what does Rust mean to you, I suppose?
So having come from JavaScript, which is very loose, relaxed language, it kind of lays on its back, thinking, yeah, write whatever code you like. I'll handle it later. And that's how it also tends to be in runtime. You can imagine.
No compile time, type checking, and things like that might occur in Rust.
Occur a lot in Rust, yes. So I kind of well, that's not the only thing that Rust has going for it. It is strictly typed.
Mm-hmm.
It also has this rather unique compile time checking concept called borrowed checking. If you did, and well, I did not come from that background, but I understand that in C, like languages, there are these things called references, and you could make a value, make a reference for it, pass that around to different places, maybe even in the context of multiple threads. And well, you better make sure yourself that that reference is valid, as long as things have it, because if it's not valid, then something tries to use it, you're in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And those languages don't do much. Maybe there are other tools that are used to check these things, but Rust has built-in support for that.
Very cool. So within Mobus Operandi, you're getting together to learn Rust. Is anybody using Rust kind of in that full-time environment? I know that some libraries that I like to use in Python actually are written in Rust. So that's when I've used Rust libraries in the past. But I guess what has the learning led to? Or is anybody using it more now that they've done these mobs? Or maybe are there any observations that you have regarding mob programming and working in Rust that might be interesting to the audience?
Well, I don't know if anyone's really, had some life-changing or life-improving results from this. We've been doing this for 4 to 5 months now, and well, for one, Rust may be a excellent candidate for mob because of its inherent difficulty learning.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we're getting a lot of benefit from mob in this, and I see it because I'm there. I see it. People, when and I having passed the initial kind of steep hill in studying Rust, and I explain these concepts to others, and I see, I don't know what they would have how they would have coped with these difficulties on their own. And I'm sure there's so many people out there trying to learn not only Rust, but many difficult things, many challenging things, and maybe documentation or whatever things they're getting for themselves, books or whatever. Maybe they're not the best at explaining these concepts, or maybe they're not the best for the way that these particular people think. So maybe you got the wrong book for yourself. But so it would work in mob very differently, right?
Absolutely. And I think that when you're in a mob, you have this idea, you can bounce ideas off of people, and then also you can get real-time verification from other people that are learning at the same time. So one thing that I've observed when no one knows what's happening in a mob is that some people will say, I think it works like this, and then another person will say, no, I actually don't think it's working that way. I think it's this. And that back and forth is invaluable because you're not only solidifying the idea in your mind, but you're kind of working through everybody's interpretation of what just happened. And I really like seeing that when in a mob. So you said that this group meets up often. I often advocate for people to join some sort of software development community to kind of expand their skill set. Do you have any maybe interesting observations from your time starting the group and maybe trying to get it out there? Do you have any advice for somebody that would want to do something similar to what you've accomplished?
Definitely. Well, first, don't underestimate the amount of time that it takes to reach out and organize probably depending on what you're reaching out for. I found that apparently people, mature, responsible people who have the tendency to show up for things and have an interested in a language such as Rust, and also have an interest in studying it in a mob format, they're not easy to find, especially if they have available time. So that's one. Another thing is, try to put people in kind of there cannot be a range too large of skill set in one mob of participants.
Mm.
Put the beginners with the advanced ones, then the advanced ones they get bored. But there I did find a little bit of a way around this, that if a beginner shows up and they want this particular schedule, but it's a more of an advanced group, then they could participate as and a non-participant, just an observer.
Mm.
And some people, they do that. Yeah, I'm even thinking of streaming this. Well, at least the ones that I participate in live on Twitch or YouTube.
Yeah. And I think there have been a few live streamed either pairs or mobs, and I think it's been valuable to people who have never actually had the experience before, and especially if Rust, I think, is maybe a more esoteric language, and so I think that there likely would be particular interest in languages like Rust, or maybe like Elixir, I think is another one that I might put in a similar category, where they're super valuable languages, but they're very rare to find people practicing them out in the wild. And it's an interesting paradigm, because this library that I mentioned earlier about Python using Rust, they went from I think a C++ library to a Rust library, and they had like 1,000% performance increase or something. It's just abnormal. And I found that really interesting. And so even though they're difficult languages to work with, or especially like people that are considering like alternative languages for embedded programming, I think that would be a great idea, for sure. And I think there would be an audience for it.
Yeah. And I'll throw in there that I love this whole idea, mob to learn. That's kind of like their genesis. Like, hey, I want to learn Rust, I want to do it. It leads to some really fun mobbing sessions where instead of like you have competing ideas on how to do things, it's like everyone's trying to figure it out. So everyone's a researcher, everyone's Googling stuff, and you have this queue of experiments, and it can be really fun. One question I like to ask people who do these mob meetups is, what's your, a startup, I hear, is tough. Like you're in a remote meeting, boom, there's 3 or 4 people, and they're all getting started for the first time with mobbing. Like, what's your tool chain? How do you get them rolling? What's your particular go-to for that to get the mob going?
Well, I remember doing that. I'm not at that point anymore. It's been a while since that happened.
Oh,
usually
okay.
I'm in a group and there's some newcomer occasionally. It just take it slow. And make sure that tell everyone that it's okay. Get your environment together, especially since we're using the mob.sh tool. That's the domain.
Yeah.
And that means that everyone are using their own environment. So it can take a while, and it's important that it's fun, and no one feels that they're you know, that something is wrong because of them.
Mm.
You know, make them feel this is normal. We are here as a mob to let you know everything you need to know to help you get set up. This is our role now.
Nice. Well, this might be a good transition time, but I mean, you know, we'll put links in the show notes if you want to join Don doing some Rust, different time zones. So we shout out, call to action the audience to join in on his mobs. But let's transition to the next topic. So one of the topics on here was mob for hire. So I feel like this would be kind of like a fun discussion on, you know, let's hypothetically think of what it would be like to have a mob for hire consultancy. It sounds very nefarious, right? Nefarious, but
Mob for hire.
Yeah, exactly. So what were your thoughts here? What's kind of your thoughts to get the brainstorming going?
Mob is very young, and I feel you know, like all good things that, you know, enter the world and find popularity, it's usually seems to be exponential growth. So, you know, entrepreneurial people, if you're out there listening, get on this wave and use the mob name because it seems to be the one that's getting more popularity in your marketing. I mean, that's kind of the aspect. I actually spoke today with a person, a developer, and he said he knew a similar concept before, but it didn't have this mob, you know, marketing to it. You know, he knew a group of people who were a group of developers for hire, and you know, they got paid probably a daily basis, and you know, they didn't do long contracts with, you know, all this so it's kind of more of an agile approach. You know, hire us, we'll do your work. Well, I'm thinking of a similar thing, but it's a mob. If you approach a company who appreciates appreciates mob, they have maybe some mob teams, and you tell them, you know, everyone's trying to expand, and we've got this thing already going on here. Just, you know, hire us.
And it's go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to say it would be pretty interesting, and I wonder if there would be takers. You know, I think that there are definitely situations where a company would want a high level of scrutiny on, you know, something, especially like refactorings. I think would be a really great place for that. Because it's a discussion of quality. It's producing high levels of quality, and I almost think like combining the idea of streaming the mobbing session with the mob to hire, of like, you know, one way for that group to market themselves is to do videos on mobbing refactorings, and then just say, hey, you could hire us at any time, and it could be a really strong value proposition, because they can see the quality of the work that comes out and the process and what they would be paying for, and it would just be something that you can kind of like drop into place. So you know, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it could very well work. But yeah, the appreciation for mobs. So I'm always trying to grow my list of companies that mob on Trello, that I keep that board, and so, but that list is still growing. You know, it's not necessarily, it's big, but it's not. I think I still see people saying, "What's mob programming?" sometimes. So you know, I think there will be some critical mass that we will reach one day, that you know, we'll start seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's under the same stream of thought as there's certain companies that are really public about their practices, right? You know, they write books, they speak at conferences, and it's front and center, like their practices and how they do things is like their selling point for, them as a company. And I could definitely see that, once there's, like you said, a certain quality, a certain desire for quality, or a certain desire for flow efficiency, I could see, right? And so instead of, I'm not a marketing person, so I'm not sure what the front page would look like for this hypothetical mob for hire team. But, so it'd be like, instead of, waiting for approvals, the team will get it done together now, right? Right, because it's reviewed as it's done, right? So you get high scrutiny, high flow efficiency, something like that. Any other thoughts? I mean, there's a ton of different directions to go with this if someone were to actually consider this, but any other thoughts on this one, Don, but before maybe changing topics?
Perhaps the front page could have a theme of kind of a noir downtown mob, fedora hats and this kind of a monotonic color theme, and cigar smoke rising, mob for hire. Hire us.
I think
we'll get the job done.
Yeah.
I think also working on open source, because getting that out there, one option would be there are a lot of companies that will reinvest into open source. Often they'll use open source, and then some portion of their employees will go and work on those open source libraries. And so it could be an interesting way to get involved inside the open source economy, and stream development of the open source work that then goes into the code base, and then maybe that gets attention there too. So there's a lot of really cool options.
Nice. Yeah. And that picture you painted, Don, of what was funny is a previous place I worked at, when we first started experimenting with mobbing, everyone who was in the early adopters experimental group to try mobbing, I took one of those pictures and then put their faces in all the mobsters. So. Nice. Cool. Well, let's jump to the last one. Let's talk about Teal and why Teal Organization is something that's attractive to you. What is it about Teal? Maybe for quick definition for our audience, what does Teal mean to you, and why is it attractive?
Well, in this industry, I was never employed. I was always freelance. And where I was freelancing for, it always felt like, very, very open environment, where I could be myself, bring myself, speak freely, and bring my ideas, my creativity, and that's where I would like to find myself, always in that kind of an environment where there's safety and people can bring themselves, and that's what I feel Teal is about. Teal is and all I know about Teal is from this book I'm reading. It's called Reinventing Organizations. It's based on a lot of research into organizations and looking at the history of the organization, well, the kinds of organizations, or the mentality, how people work, how the organization is structured, how people think and feel in an organization, how authority is dispersed or disseminated in an organization. All of these things, and they've kind of tracked the history of how this began from very early roots of ancient forms of organization and until today. And they've kind of noticed this pattern evolving toward something. And that's something they call it Teal.
Mm.
So what are some of the principles inside Teal Organizations? Is it, you know, I think there are things like self-management and things like that, but, you know, how, I guess, what have you seen, or how have you been experimenting with, you know, Teal ideas, you know, those sorts of things? Is there anything that comes to mind regarding maybe application of your learnings, those sorts of things?
It feels like where I would naturally you know, belong. So, you know, I never had to experiment, or it's kind of like, you know, I read this, I'm reading this book, and I'm thinking, well, you know what, I don't know how people manage to bring themselves to work every day working in an organization. It's not like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the traditional hierarchy can feel oppressive, and redistributing the way that an organization conducts itself can help alleviate those problems. I think one thing that you know, that I like about is kind of this idea of like evolution of the organization is kind of a primary concern, and that the organization is treated more like a biological organism than like a hierarchical tree of, you know, command and control, that sort of thing. So yeah, and you know, I think I largely align with that, and try and find good ways to make sure that people are treated as peers, and that the organization can evolve given its surroundings and its surrounding context.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me because, and maybe this is an implicit assumption that I've carried for the last 4 years. And for me, that my experience of mobbing is very Teal version of mobbing, right? And it's hard for me to think of a version of mobbing that's not Teal, but you can envision it, right? One where, you know, it's all the right brilliant minds, same place, same computer thing going on, right? But it's more command and control, and they're being handed tasks, and they have no liberty on what tech stacks they use, or, you know, maybe they don't have extreme ownership to change their process, right? And so it's more like, you know, the amount of self-organization and freedom is greatly hampered, and, you know, and so it seems to me that mobbing flourishes in a Teal type mindset, right? Or else you're a lot of the brain power is to waste, right? Because you have a group of people who are realizing like, well, if we adjusted this, we could automate this and then save all this time, and, you know, and let's change our tech stack from this to this for this part of the product, or and so I think for me, the kind of high levels of liberty and self-organization, I've been operating that way so long that I'm probably spoiled. I'm not sure what I'm not sure if I can remember what it would be like to work any other way. And I wonder, this makes me wonder too, if mobbing doesn't work well in some places because they're not Teal. So it's like a round, what's the saying? Round peg, square hole, or whatever, vice versa. Yeah. I don't know, that's from my mind.
Can you imagine
yeah,
a mob going like, well, sir, if you don't mind me suggesting, perhaps, just perhaps, we can try and take a look at this from a little bit of a different perspective. You know, this kind of level of cautiousness.
Oh, right.
In mob. And Oh, I mean, no disrespect to the current implementation. It's very well written, very well written. But perhaps, I've noticed this pattern, it doesn't get you very far, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, in order for any organization to operate well, I think feedback needs to flow freely, and definitely in a very, I think you can still be deferential and give feedback, but yeah, the model doesn't lend itself very well to these inflows and outflows of feedback and adjustments to the surrounding. But I've also, I have heard of organizations doing mob programming where they assign people, and based on their role and their level of experience, they're put together with other people based on what they need to accomplish. And there's kind of an orchestrator. And I've heard of that happening. It's a pretty interesting concept. Not necessarily anything I've experienced before, but it's, that's the opposite end of it. But and that's an interesting thing too, because I think a lot of people are taught to manage in a hierarchical way, and maybe they just haven't ever seen another way of doing management. And so I think it is a little bit of like just understanding that there are other possibilities for how a team is managed, how they're addressed, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so Teal also makes me think of another thing where it's really concerned, and it places high value on wholeness and people, becoming their best selves and bringing their whole selves. And I feel like there's a tie into mobbing there too. What do you think, Don?
Well, like we said, mob seems to be kind of a Teal dependent or Teal enabled activity, even though sometimes, and I think I've heard the story in your podcast, in this podcast, about some company who had it was kind of a dysfunctional company, but they had, in some hidden, hard to find room, they had a team that actually more agile and functioning. And so don't be discouraged. Try to get your way if you want to introduce mob, and it's not a very Teal environment. That everything evolves in small steps at a time.
Nice. Yeah, and I've seen it before too. I think I've seen it in small ways with a lot of people, but then certain individuals come to mind who are very excited about how they've grown as a person a lot from mobbing. You know what I mean? They've grown in social skills, they've grown in their technical skills. They've grown in a lot of ways, and very appreciative of the mobbing experience. And obviously that's not for everyone. Some people might have the opposite reaction to the more social aspect of it, but I've definitely seen that quite dramatically. So I think that has some good synergy with Teal.
Yeah, so I think that this is a good place to kind of close it out. And so Don, do you have anything that you'd like to plug or share? I know that there's obviously the Mobus Operandi group. Anything else before we close out the episode?
Yes, if you'd like to study Rust, find us Mobus Operandi, link in the description. We have multiple different groups, and who knows how big it'll get by the time you listen to this episode. You can find me. My handle is Mighty I Am everywhere.
Sounds good. And so to our audience, if you know somebody trying to learn Rust, or maybe somebody's struggling with the way that their organization is currently organized, you may want to recommend this and share this episode to them. And please be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and all that. And then thank you, Dawn, for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
See everybody.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.